one of my goals, I guess, in life is to travel and see as much as I can see. And East Coast wise, I've pretty well done that. I've never got to go west, but I'm hoping to change that. If nothing else, maybe this summer, any way possible. I've never been west of Kentucky. I've been pretty far north, pretty far south. Like I said, most of North Carolina, South Carolina, New York, Philly, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana. I'm a little sick, a little under the weather right now, but this last year just this year, I've been fortunate enough to do some traveling. A lot of it's work related, and then some personal stuff, but that's what my wife and I kind of save for. My goal is to live everywhere once and to live nowhere forever at that goal. But I guess to pacify me, my wife is who also likes to travel. We try to, save everything we can for travel, and it's what I really enjoy. I like getting to see different places. This year has been, pretty good so far. We're literally in the 1st of March, and I've been to Tennessee, West Virginia, a bunch of places in Kentucky, Lexington, Richmond, New York, Philly, with a stopover in, I don't even remember now. But regardless, we've moved around a lot. Now, New York was a new experience for me. I'd been to Philly, but New York was a new experience for me. It really was. And I'm not going to lie, when I'm alone, I'm a lot more adventurous than I am when I'm with my family. I worried taking my family to New York. I don't know exactly what I was worried about. I guess I do. I guess I was worried about the violence and the crime and the dirty streets and the rude people. I guess that would be it. But upon getting there, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm one of those people that see the good in everybody. Everybody I can. I try my hardest to see the good in everybody. But I do get nervous about things, and there are these, stereotypes that you get, these angry, miserable New Yorkers. I spoke with a friend who lived there before 9/11 and said some of that was true. Rude, sometimes mean people. But she said after 9/11 that changed. Yeah, that cough button's going to get wore out today. And then it was a much friendlier place. And I found that to be true. But I found a lot of things in my travels, over the years, and over this past year especially. I keep going to different places looking for different people. Now, 14 years ago this month, we went to Philadelphia for the first time. And it was more culture shock than any trip I've made. And the reason I say that is because to that point, outside of Florida, which, if you watch the news, should be culture shock for everybody, but all the crazy people that make it on the news in Florida aren't just running wild in Florida. But Philly was different the first time I went. Philly felt different. Philly felt scary. Philly felt dangerous. And not because it was, because I had stereotypes of big cities in my head. Whereas, if you watch First 48 on TV, they have a season where they spend 50, 60% of that time in Louisville, Kentucky, a place that I went frequently. And, in high school, we traveled to Louisville a lot to stay with my friend Caleb and his mom. I would go up with his brother Josh, and we would go up there and watch shows and stuff. And there was a difference between Louisville and Knott County, no doubt. Maybe more of a difference than I see in Kentucky and then Knott County and, say, West Virginia or Tennessee. I don't think it's a geographic thing, because it happens with Lexington too. It happens in a different way with Lexington, but it happens with Lexington too. And again, I don't think it's geographic, that it's more of a difference between two Kentucky cities than it is between Kentucky and somewhere else, like, say, Johnson City or Knoxville. I think it's the desire to be separate from, to be different from. I don't see it as much now, but I've seen it a lot when I was younger, and things got said a lot when I was younger about people being very concerned about not being viewed as Kentuckians and being from Louisville. That is to say that Louisville is a different type of Kentucky than Kentucky. It's a more sophisticated Kentucky. It's a more proper Kentucky. It's a less hillbilly Kentucky. I believe there really are people that feel that way. I know there are. There were people that felt that way then. I just don't believe it's as prevalent as I thought it was. And I believe that that's a real thing. I mean, it has to be. They don't have the same culture as us. They don't have the same existence as us. They don't, Lexington's very much that way. They want to separate themselves from mountain Kentucky. And they want to be, city. They don't want to be mountain, and they are, and that's a beautiful thing. Like, they have a beautiful culture, especially Louisville, music scene and stuff. I really have always had a love for Louisville. There's just something about it, and I really, really adore it. I do. I don't know if it's just because I spent a lot of my teens there on weekends and stuff and had this desire to be there all the time that made me develop this stuff. I don't know what it is. But all my memories of Louisville are fond, and, but I look at Louisville more as the outskirts of Louisville, not downtown. I don't have a lot of experience downtown. A lot of the little places we'd go to watch shows and stuff were Bardstown Road, the Highlands, or on Preston, I believe is where Tech World was. Things of that nature. We were outside of that downtown area. I don't have that same connection with Lexington, but I like a lot about Lexington. I love things like Manchester Music Hall and the Borough, and the more I do go, the more I find that fascination with it. I like city living. I, to be honest with you, am to a point in my life where I would prefer city living because of convenience and the ability to experience things. But more so than anything because I've lived in one spot for so long, and I just don't like that. I never lived in... Well, I didn't live in Winchester long enough to form an opinion one way or the other, but we kind of use Winchester as that, place to sleep when you worked and then you went to Lexington. Charleston, West Virginia is somewhere that I frequent quite often for work, and we were there in February. I took my wife and them up for a concert. I think my wife and a lot of people who go to Charleston kind of expect it to be more like home. And for a city with its location and things like that, maybe it should be, but Charleston feels less like home to me than any other local city I go to. I don't know if it's experiences I've had or what the issue is, but Charleston feels tense to me. West Virginia feels tense to me. And I don't feel that tension as much here in Kentucky. I didn't feel that tension in New York. I didn't feel that tension in Philly. And I didn't feel it in New York. I didn't feel it in Louisville. Didn't feel it in North or South Carolina. There's been places I felt it before. I felt it in Atlanta. But I don't know what it is. It's not bad. It's not that I just hate Charleston, West Virginia. It's just it's not on my level of places I like to go. It's not on that list. And that obviously could be bad experience. You know, I spent a lot of times in hotels up there working, and I spent a lot of those times in cheaper hotels where the cops are being called all hours of the night. All hours of the night. But on the same hand, I was up there right after I can't remember if it wasn't a flood. It might have been, they had a tornado. I can't remember, but everybody was in hotels, and that was there was a sense of sorrow in the city at that time. I'm sorry, I have a horrible memory. I don't mean, it's just been a few years back, and maybe that's a memory that's impacted me. And then I spent a lot of time in a lot of very nice hotels down there. But it's very hard to get to it, and the people working the hotels, I've never had good experience with that, very seldomly. I meet a lot of rude people in those establishments. I don't meet super friendly people when I go to the mall and places like that. And that's not to say that those people aren't friendly, because I have met some super friendly people up there that I work with. Those people have always been awesome and great to be around. And then the last time I was up there, I tried to help a guy chase down a boy that was trying to play the knockout game, where they just walk up and punch a guy for no reason that's not looking, sucker punch him and run. So there's been negative things, that I've seen and experienced, and I'm sure that in some way it has to affect how I feel about that city. But I don't judge that city based on just my experiences. There's no reason to do that. I always go back optimistically and go, okay, this time, because there's been good trips there, been really good trips there. But it's not a place that I enjoy my family coming and hanging out with me when I'm on the road working. But there is a lot to do. But again, it's a weird feeling there. Now, I turned that around to Lexington. When I was in New York as a Kentucky person, straight out of the mountains, I didn't feel uncomfortable or judged. Yet when I'm in Lexington, Kentucky, sometimes I do feel that way. I do not think that that's real, that people are really doing that. I think it's an insecurity that I've had since I was younger at times. Not that I'm ashamed of where I'm from, but I was always told that they didn't like people from where I'm from. So I think that's just a holdover from that. But it's amazing how when we travel to these different places, we have different experiences based on the actual events around us and the actual people around us, but also influenced by preconceived notions. And I mean, we approach everything in life that way, obviously. But this last trip, the trip I just got back from, obviously we started in Knott County, and we made our way to Richmond, Kentucky. Picked up my daughter. She goes to school there. We went from Richmond, Kentucky, up through West Virginia. I cannot remember for the life of me where we stayed at that first night. It was pouring the snow. I know that. I believe we were in Maryland, but I don't know. It was late and it was pouring the snow, and we were high elevation trying to get off a hill, and I just don't remember. Sorry, I forgot to cough, but we got up early the next morning, headed on into New York. This is the first time I've seen New York. Like I said, I've been in Philly, I've been in Louisville, because footprint-wise, Louisville's a huge city, footprint-wise. I mean, if you look at what, I guess, the city limits on a map. I've been through Pittsburgh. I've been to Orlando, trying to think, Atlanta, But Atlanta was a brief trip. I don't remember it very well, I'm not gonna lie. But I've been through some bigger cities. The initial response to New York was underwhelming for me. Seeing it from a distance, I don't know why. Because that changed, and it changed rapidly. But the initial thing was like, cool, there's New York. Oh, man, I thought it would be bigger. That's because you can't see except for what's in front of your face, obviously. It's not seeing the forest for the trees. But my initial response was lackluster. Not disappointed in the city, but just like, thought that'd be bigger. When we went through the tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, I was worried about my wife. My wife hates water, and here we're going in a tunnel, underwater. I thought she was going to have a panic attack on me. On the other hand, I do stuff like that, and like, very few things bother me. I thought I was going to have a panic attack, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because she was so nervous. I don't know what the deal was. We pop out of the tunnel. We come into the city, and like, the traffic wasn't overwhelming like I expected it to be. It was that instant honking of horns. The minute that's real. You see this in movies. That's real. I mean, it's nonstop, and you don't really even see people angry or throwing their head. You just see people honking horns. I guess it's a hey, I'm here, don't run over me thing. I don't know, but that's a little perturbing at first. It's because it's instantly honk honk. I mean, the minute you pull in the city. I get lost. Well, I don't really get lost. We go exactly where we're supposed to go, but you know, I guess I travel so much and I go to so many hotels, I'm used to, unless I'm in the middle of nowhere in the boonies, I'm used to big signs and big things for hotels. Our hotel didn't have much of a signage out front. Literally, the opening it had on the street, 10 foot wide, because it shared the lower story lobby shared with a restaurant. But anyway, I let my family off. Let them out of the vehicle. This way I can go, because we've passed it. I mean, GPSs were there and we didn't see it. So I let them out. They walk straight back. They find it. I'm expecting this massive ordeal to get around, because, you know, the traffic and everything's one line. I'm like, man, I'll be forever getting my easy, super easy. Go down a block or so, turn, go down a block or so, turn, and come back up. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination. So here I am. We're at the hotel. They take our vehicle. They have our vehicle. No. When I leave, when I let my wife and them off, I go up. I make one right, go up, and I'm making the next right. And you know, the crosswalk is a don't walk, and I have, or is a walk, and I have a green light. But I have a green light, and there's nobody near the crosswalk. Everybody's done went, because they walk where the crosswalks to go or not. So I go to pull in, and I'm confused. I'm watching everything. I wait till the crosswalk says don't go, and pull in and make the cut. And by this point, people are lined back up. But I'm way back from this, making sure I'm at the right turn. So I've got speed coming into this turn, and it's a don't walk. A guy walks directly in to the front fender of my wife's Grand Cherokee, just dead into it. Bounces off 180 or 360s, I guess, or 180s. Gets himself oriented back right, starts to walk the other direction, turns back, and just walks around my vehicle like it never happened. And I mean, he hit hard. I was worried about him, and then once I realized, well, he's walked off, he's okay, I was worried about the vehicle. He hit fairly hard, but he paid it no attention whatsoever. Ironically enough, one of the things I adapted to very well was the disregard for stop signs on, or you know, the crosswalking signs. So I almost get hit no more than an hour later. Which I insist is partly due to my wife keep going, Justin, and when you do that, I stop, and unfortunately it makes me stop in front of cars. I could have beat it, but that's beside the point. I get back around the hotel. They take my vehicle. This is on Thursday. They put it on a lift and store it. I don't see it again until Sunday. And I didn't want to. No desire to drive in the city. Looking back, if it wasn't for parking, it would not have been that bad at certain times. Obviously Saturday night, oh man, you couldn't, it was ridiculous. But parking would have been a nightmare. But we're here, we're in the city. We instantly go out to explore. And that's basically what we did. Just foot miles, not counting any other form of transportation, subway or anything like that. Just foot miles. 5 or 6 miles first night, 6 or 7 the second night. I did 12 the third day, and I don't know how many miles I did on subway that third day. I take my family. I have 2 daughters. I have a daughter and a wife. My son and I can be ready in 5 minutes. My son does not like to walk. My mother-in-law likes to kind of wait till everybody else is ready to leave. So it takes my wife and daughter so long to get ready that I've got hours every morning to kill that I can. So I got to do some extra exploring. The city was unbelievable. I mean, it was. I loved everything about it. The architecture is far and away my favorite thing. Don't get me wrong, going to film locations for the Ghostbusters movie and trying to recreate the opening shot for the library and going to the fire station, things of that nature were extremely fun. Seeing Times Square and having my family see Times Square because my son and daughter love Times Square. And I mean, there's a huge age difference there, 21 and 9. They loved Times Square, and Times Square was really neat. But the architecture, we went to an art museum that was an animation. It's supposed to be an animation art, and they had a different display at that time, but it was really good. But that was the extent of what art I got to see. Sorry, I probably cut some of that out with the cough button. But that was the extent of the art I got to see while I was there. But the architecture, on the other hand, the churches and the New York Public Library there in Times Square and Grand Central Station, I would go back 1,000 times just for the architecture and get to see those different buildings and stuff. It's amazing, absolutely amazing, and the architecture far and away was my favorite. And I'm torn on it. Like, we went into the large church, and I'm sorry, I went and looked at so many churches I'd have to go back and see. It's a Francis or something, I guarantee you, but it's a Saint something church. Now I have to go back and look. Beautiful church, amazingly accommodating people. I don't have the utmost respect for the Catholic Church and what it's allowed to happen with its priest. Actually, I have no respect whatsoever. Then I'll look at this massive building with all these, artifacts. There were some artifacts, I don't know if they were gold, bronze, what they were, but the church is such a rich entity. And I'm sorry, I don't think for what it is it should be that rich. And so there was, back and forth emotions thinking those things as I was in there. But beside that, the architecture. But I believe, in all honesty, the library may have been my favorite. Obviously, that could be in some way influenced by the Ghostbusters. That is possible. I mean, I do have this deep love for the Ghostbusters. It could be, but it was definitely one of my favorite buildings there. It was truly amazing. The subway system wasn't bad, but when I started to get outside of Times Square, I mean, I seen things in Times Square that represented, I could see some homelessness, and I was always told, I don't want to go to New York City. It's a dirty old city. The Times Square wasn't really dirty. Now, on Saturday nights, it got dirty because there was stuff, like, the city seemed to do a good job of keeping things cleaned up. People are the problem. We are like a virus. We are the issue. So, you can't fault a city for that when it looks like they're doing everything they can. But it wasn't dirty. It wasn't extremely nasty. It wasn't all those cliches that I'd heard about New York. I mean, don't get me wrong. There was dirty spots. But have you been up through McDowell? I've done a lot of work, environmental inspection and stuff up through as we run a line for that new road. If you've not seen the creeks up through McDowell, or if you've not seen some backyards we have in our area, we can't talk about how dirty New York is. Come on. We all as a race, a human race, are guilty of that. But a beautiful city, I thought. Beautiful architecture. Again, people were nice. Getting in the subway systems, you see the issue with homelessness and things of that nature. The thing is about homelessness that really breaks my heart is I talked to one gentleman there because we watched a guy just, I thought, passing out and having a drug fit like I've seen so many times, so many other places. And the guy worked for the subway system there. And he said they'd called the cops on this guy numerous times. That's what they'd thought. And he had schizophrenia and something else, and he just mentally was in shambles. And that guy said there are a lot of homes and a lot of shelters and places for the homeless to stay. He's no expert, neither am I. He didn't know the number of homeless people. He said, but he felt like you could house a good majority of the homeless people safely in these shelters. But the issue is, a lot of them either have chemical dependencies, which the shelters don't permit. They have issues with law enforcement, and the shelters have to call the law enforcement on them based on things that they do and the way they react. But a lot of it is mental illness, and they don't want to be. So, I had always assumed this, and him being there much more often than myself, I would assume that he's correct on it, and it appears to be correct, that the homeless situation in New York is much more a situation of mental illness than anything. It's hard to help these people because they're not getting the help with their mental illness that they need. And I talked to a lot of people, and me and that guy was talking, and there was a lady that was working there with him, and she said she had originally grew up on the West Coast. She was from Jersey, had moved to the West Coast, lived in California for a long time, come back to New York, moved back to California, and was recently just back to New York. And she said it was a different situation in different parts of the country. She said in California, for instance, they had a lot of the same issue, mental illness, things of that nature, but in warmer climates, or at least in that warmer climate of California, she had noticed, and I said, look, if you don't mind, can I interject and just ask if my assumption is correct? You've seen a lot of people who were trying to live as tramps and hobos. And she said, yes, exactly. She said, you have this group of mentally unstable people who are suffering on the streets, who have an issue that they cannot fix themselves, a mental issue, and they are on the streets due to that issue or due to other circumstances. Quite often veterans, or quite often people who just have no family or have managed to slip away from their family, and their mental illness is so severe that they just can't function in society, and those people have a problem. She said, and then you have a section of people who are just down on their luck. And that section of people generally bounce back. They generally stay in the shelters and get on programs and bounce back, and they're not drug addicted. She said, then you have a population that's drug addicted. And even though that may cross over with some of the mental illness, with a lot of the mental illness, you have a large sector of people that are just drug addicted. And they are eating up some resources, but they're not getting rehabilitation, which would really be the only way to help them. She said, but the one that bothered her was this large group of people from 18 to 30 who thought, because they read a Jack Kerouac book, that it would be cool to be a hobo on the road for a couple years. And she said she didn't have any issue with their desire for an experience. And I agree with that. And her and I agreed with what the issue really was. The issue really is, most of these people have never had to live as hard as these people on the streets are having to live. Therefore, it's uncomfortable for them. So one, they do have resources. They do have the ability to call back home. They can get money, and they often have money. But often, as part of the experience, they're using up resources intended for people who don't have the resources that these people have. So they're dumpster diving, and they're going to these fruit places and getting the free fruit, and going and getting the free bread, and they're doing all these things that are intended for people who really don't have another option, despite the fact that these people have another option. And they're often getting handouts and money and food and shelter and things that would be better served to go to the real homeless population, because when these people are done playing, in her estimation, 75% of them can just call, get a bus ticket, and go home. She's met a lot of people from very wealthy families. She was a civil servant of some nature out there. I don't remember what it was, if it was in their subway system, busing system, what it was. But I felt that was an interesting conversation and a good insight into that. And we made the trip down after we left New York to Philly for a day. Like I said, we'd been to Philly 14 years ago this month. And we wanted to recreate a shot of a picture with my daughter and my wife. My son wasn't born at the time. And my mother-in-law had never been. It was cold, and it was a lot of walking, and everybody had done a lot of walking for a couple of days. So they didn't enjoy it as much as myself and my wife did. And it was Sunday. A lot of things were closed. But, you know, the first time I went to Philadelphia, I said there was this culture shock, and it was size and people and things of that nature made it feel so different. After I'd been to New York, I went back down to just the historical district, not downtown, obviously, but just the historical district on a cold day in the 1st of March, or it could have been the last of February. I don't know what today's date is, or what yesterday's date, or the day before yesterday's date was. But the difference made Philadelphia feel more quaint, at least the historical district, and more peaceful and quiet. And it was. There wasn't a lot of people out, and everyone was super friendly and had a wonderful time. So, any fear or trepidation you have about going somewhere, it's important to go and just do it and experience things. Not just going places, but anything. And a lot of times, those fears are alleviated, and you realize that we're all in this together. We're all on this one big rock hurling through space, thousands of miles an hour. Like, the little differences of where we occupy on that space shouldn't matter. They don't matter. We can make them matter, but they don't. And it's important to see things like New York. It's important to see things like a strip job. It's important to see things like a freeway system, because you realize we are a virus. That's what we are. And we're devouring this place. But see, we could be a fungus. We could be an altered bacteria. We could promote some type of growth or some type of positivity. It's not that all things are bad, but we are all consuming, and we have to figure out some way to chill out from that. Because as you look at the city and the blacktop and the buildings as you come up on it's a scar. But the earth adapts really well, much better than we do. And if we worked with the earth, then we can adapt together. That's my philosophical hippie talk for the day. I guess is the best way to describe it. But I love my travel, and I loved my experiences. And this on some things I learned. I learned that, and this is for all places I've traveled this year so far, I learned that New York is friendly and clean and hospitable, and there are elements of it. I've seen violence, I've seen things of that nature, but I see all those things anywhere I go. There's just as much good there as there is anywhere else, and I really enjoyed it. I learned that regardless of where you go, surprisingly enough, there's MAGA stuff for sale everywhere. Tennessee has just stores of it, basically, in Gatlinburg, and New York has a shelf of it in every store you go in. Another thing I noticed is Caucasian Americans in the South wear a lot of MAGA stuff. Caucasian Americans in the North do not. However, people of non-Caucasian descent, or people of African American descent, or especially it seemed people of, I'm assuming, Cuban descent, based on hearing some language and some accent, do wear a lot of MAGA stuff in the North. I learned that, and I'm going to butcher this name, and I'm sorry, I'm just horrible with the name. The historical district of Philadelphia was big on Mike Buttigieg. I'm horrible with names, I'm sorry. And they expressed their support for him in a positive, nice manner. It was nice. I noticed from bumper stickers that I expected to see no Trump bumper stickers at all, basically past West Virginia. And to the contrary, I see nobody else's bumper stickers but Trump's past West Virginia. Whereas, surprisingly, I see a ton of Bernie and Hillary stickers in Lexington. So, that kind of something I've noticed over this last little bit. The biggest and most prolific, the biggest thing I noticed, because it was kind of in my face because of a large group of people on the subway having a discussion, is Cuban Americans consider, I guess, I don't know if it's due to the interview or what, but they consider Bernie Sanders a communist, and they consider him to be no better than Fidel Castro. Which, look, I'm not political. I think we need a third party. I think we should vote against them all. But I don't know if I'd throw him in that category. But they will. And so I heard a discussion on the subway, and then in two different Cuban-owned stores. Well, I say Cuban because I went and got my breakfast sandwiches every morning, and they were awesome because New York doesn't have biscuits. I learned that. But they had a Cuban flag and things of that nature. But anyway, that those people really don't like communism, and it's weird that melting pot of New York, there's people there that had to live through communist Russia. There's people there who had to live through Iran. There's people there who have come from India. There's people there from everywhere. And it's one of the most impressive things about the city to me is I heard so many languages. I saw so many different features and different peoples and different dress. And in my experience, and maybe my experience is different than everyone else's. And if it is, I'm okay with it because I'm pleased with my experience. But in my experience, everyone was happy and smiling and in a good mood. And I like that. It makes me happy and it makes me smile and it makes me in a good mood. And I just particularly, that's what I like. So, I mean, that's something that was definitely picked up from this trip is there's a lot of happy people in the world, and that's a good thing. That's a real good thing. That makes me happy because I like to see people in a good mood, and I like to see people doing well, and I like to see people feeling good about themselves, and I like to see people loving each other and getting along. And I've seen very little in my travels so far this year. Really, overall, I'll say this: we left for Myrtle Beach one year, and we were going at the end of Biker Week, which would have us being there through the beginning of Black Biker Week, because they have two different Biker Weeks. I got told time and time again, you don't want to be there during Biker Week, and you don't want to be there during Black Biker Week. It's just 2 weeks. Actually, one guy told me it's bad enough to go during Biker Week, but you definitely don't want to go during Black Biker Week. We've done that twice now, because the area that we want to stay in is just less populated for whatever reason. It's earlier in the year. It's not as hot. It's a good time to be at the beach. There's been issues. There's been cops here and there. There's been shootings. But of every one of those shootings that I've looked up that's happened in what time I've been down there, absolutely zero of them have been related to the bikers, either Caucasian, African American, or bikers in general. They have always been related to local individuals. They have an issue there, a violence issue that's starting to become somewhat of an issue. But a lot of our issues are amplified and sometimes blown out of proportion by the fact that we have a 24-hour news cycle. Look, a lot of these things were always happening at a much higher rate than they're happening now. They just weren't being covered 24 hours a day. Things are getting better. Go back and listen to my podcast on the statistical proof that things are getting better. I know there's not been many of these lately, but it's because I've been traveling and I've been sick and a lot of different things. But I love doing these. I love you people. I love that you listen. There's enough of you listening now. I'm going to keep doing it. And it's not a lot. Don't get me wrong. It's not a lot by any stretch of the imagination. But it's really fun for me. If you live in Hazard, Kentucky, go to Red Spotted Note. It's the only place you can get my book in Hazard, Kentucky. If you don't live anywhere near this area and you have to order it off Amazon.com, it is available for Prime free shipping right now. Check out other podcasts, because other podcasts are great. Check out Raving Television Addict. It's up on iTunes. It's a funny podcast. I've been on there once. Yeah. Be happy. Have a good day. You guys rock.